Okay, so welcome to a conversation with Cometan, episode 2. We're back with David Mathisen again. Today we're going to be talking about a few different topics. One that I wanted to cover was ancient Egypt, because I don't think we covered it too much last time. So that was one thing I wanted to focus on. And then I've lined up a few other things with David as well that we want to talk about, astronism and loads of other things as well. But we'll get into that. But first, I suppose, how are you, David? You all right? You good?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
good.
Thanks. All good here. What's going on over there? And are you in Lancashire as well? I was speaking with the
Yeah,
the lads from the podcast the other day, and
all
they
right.
said, "Oh yeah, he's from our hometown."
Yeah. How did that go, actually? Was it good? You have a
Yeah, it
good
was very
conversation?
nice. We had a terrific conversation. I really enjoyed
Yeah,
it, and put together some visuals to show some of
brilliant.
the yeah.
Was
So I
it mainly
recommend
sort
everyone
of,
check it out.
yeah, I will actually. Yeah, I've not seen it yet. Was it mainly you putting, you were just explaining sort of what you did to me last time, what we were speaking about last time? Was it mainly that, or is it more another subject? Was it mainly the theory
Yeah.
about sort of like that lost civilization, in prehistory and looking at that, or is it more other areas?
Right. Well, I go on a lot of different podcasts, so I always try and show something a little bit different each
Yeah.
time so that anyone who watches all of them doesn't get the same thing over and over again. Like otherwise I could just push a tape player and press play. But
Yeah. Um,
so yeah, we talked for about 45 minutes or so, just about different things. And then
yeah.
I had a presentation put together and I showed some artwork,
Right.
putting some ancient artwork lined up with star charts, and got into
Oh, definitely
a
look at
little bit
that.
of it, a little bit about where it might have come from in ancient
Yeah.
culture, predating Egypt, like we talked about. But we also got into what it might mean.
Yeah,
What
that's
its
kind of
significance is for us today. A
yeah,
little bit
that's
at
kind of
the
what I
end.
want to get into as well, because maybe a bit later on after we've talked about Egypt, I want to really talk about what this all means for the current world that we're living in, but also think about the future as well. But just I suppose to start on Egypt, for my dissertation that I did, I didn't really get much chance to talk about Egypt because it was more prehistoric that I was looking at, and of course as well, there is so much with ancient Egypt in sort of astronomical religion and also star myths, that it is sort of a topic in and of itself, isn't it? You could do a dissertation on just that. So what I sort of want to understand from you is that do you what is the connection, what is sort of the timeline, I suppose, whether you can answer this, from sort of the Neolithic era and then moving into Egypt? Do we see sort of really clear links between the star myths of Egypt, but also were there clear star myths? Actually, that's probably my first question. In Egypt,
Yeah.
obviously there was they worship the sun, didn't they, and things like that. So that possibly was related in some way.
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I agree with you that not only could a dissertation be done on Egypt, but
Or a
a
PhD.
million dissertations
Yeah,
on just little pieces
yeah,
of the glory that is ancient Egypt. And
yeah,
it's interesting when you ask what did they worship, and they worship the sun. And Egypt's religion or worship was a really big mystery to the world,
yeah,
even in the ancient times. So
yeah,
the ancient Greek philosophers would go over there and they would come back and they would try and explain the
yeah.
Egyptian
Way of
religion, and they would relate it to the Greek. They would say, well, there's 12 deities here and we have 12 Olympians, and this one corresponds to this one. And so they perceived a connection in the ancient times. They
right.
perceived a connection, but they also would say things like, I'm not sure sure that those priests were telling us the whole thing, you know, or nobody knows. It's a big secret.
Yes.
It was very, very mysterious. And so basically, because nobody understood, the hieroglyphics fell out of knowledge during the early part of the Christian era.
Yes.
By 500 AD, by AD 500, or maybe even earlier than that, almost nobody could read them anymore. And certainly by 1800, nobody could read them anymore. And so they had all these incredible pieces of artwork with this amazing, moving hieroglyph.
Yes.
You know, even to look at them is moving. They're so powerful. It's such a powerful form of writing, but nobody could read them. So they naturally were thrilled when they found the Rosetta Stone. Actually, I have a little video, or not video, but some visuals.
Okay.
Let me just share my screen and show the Rosetta Stone, since almost everybody's heard of the Rosetta Stone. Let me just launch in.
There was I was looking at a piece of work that was done back in this year, but it was in June, and they were looking at that, and it had some significance for what I'm doing in my theories. I'll send that to you, and I'll put it in the link as well. It's a good piece of work, so it's on this topic specifically.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I would like to find out how this relates to your theories and your work that you're doing now.
Yeah.
And you know, why did you zero in on ancient Egypt? It's not something I've actually spoken much about on the different podcasts, because it's so mysterious, it's so unfamiliar, and as I'll get into, even after the Rosetta Stone was discovered, it remained. You know, they thought that was going to crack all the codes, and they were sorely disappointed. Egypt didn't want to give up her secrets so easily. So, have you enabled the screen sharing? I think you might need to enable.
Well, yeah.
So I can share.
Should be okay now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just share my whole desktop here. And then I'll pull up this keynote.
Oh, wow.
So first, let me just show, you know, I'd like to just dedicate and recognize the late, great Anthony West, John West, not Anthony West, but there he is, John Anthony West, whom I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting and had great conversations after dinner, courtesy of Walter Cruttenden in the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge a few years back in California. And he wrote this wonderful book called Serpent in the Sky. And there's a picture of it there on the screen. And it first came out in 1979. The picture I am showing is of my copy is a 1987 edition. So it has a few different editions. I favor the 1987 edition because that's the one that I started with. But it's really changed a lot of people's research. It was a very, very, still is a very, very influential text, and it dives into some very profound and insightful aspects of ancient Egypt. So I recommend everybody check it out. But one thing that he says in there, I turned it on its side a little bit to fit it onto my slide while keeping I wanted to keep the font large enough for people to see it. He says he looks at all kinds of different pieces of evidence, including the hieroglyphs, which seem to just spring up kind of fully developed. They don't evolve out of, you know, more primitive looking scratches. They just, boom, spring full force. But there's lots of things in ancient Egypt that are like that. And he comes to the conclusion that based on all this evidence, Egypt did not, quote, develop her civilization, but inherited it. It is some culture preceding, very, very ancient. And John West was intrigued by the work of a French Alsatian esoterist and philosopher and researcher named R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch. And Schwaller in the 40s and 50s had written that it looked like the Sphinx was weathered by water, not by wind. And that was a fairly almost offhand remark by Schwaller, but John West said that's profound if it's true, because Egypt is a very dry place, and everything is presumed to be carved by the wind. And so if it was carved by rainfall and heavy downpours, then that means the Sphinx might be from a period when there was a different kind of weather pattern going on, and certainly that was predating anything we know about, because they relied on Nile flooding for all the dynasties that we read about. They didn't have downpours, they needed that Nile to flood. So when was the Sphinx carved if it was damaged by rainfall? So he said, I'm not a geologist, I need a real geologist, a certified geologist. And he reached out to a friend of his who was a professor of English at Yale and said, do you know any geologists who might be willing to come to Egypt with me? I'll pay their way and look at, I think he said he'd pay their way. I don't know the whole story. You'd have to ask Dr. Robert Schoch, because Robert Schoch is the professor who went over there, and almost everybody knows the story now, but it was in the late 80s and then early 90s. And he said, well, you're absolutely right. It is weathered by rainfall. So is there something much more ancient? So this goes to your question of when did, where did all this come from?
Yeah. I mean, it is logical to say that it was inherited, isn't it? Rather than just suddenly popped up from there, and that it does have more perhaps prehistoric origins. But I suppose as well, I suppose there probably will be elements that did develop from just aren't there, and it's sort of, that's the task of researchers, isn't it? Is to try and sort of decipher what is of ancient origin and what is perhaps of more prehistoric, depending on our terminology and of what ancient is and what prehistoric is, and how we define those things, those two terms. But I suppose that's the difficult part, isn't it?
Right. It's a giant puzzle. It's a giant mystery, mystery story, as we talked about a little bit last time. There are so many different clues to examine, and and I agree that the whatever was left to us from the ancients took on a different flavor. In different cultures that remembered it in different climates and in different places and in different situations that they faced. They were interacting with different people, and so you have kind of a different flavor in ancient India than you have in ancient Egypt, than you have in ancient Mesopotamia, but they all seem to be connected, or I wouldn't even say seem to be. They are clearly using the same, I can show that they're using the same ancient worldwide system. You mentioned that you might, take a look at that book, The Ancient Worldwide System, and actually most of what I'm going to show about ancient Egypt is in that book. But I did want to say, it's still mysterious, because after the Rosetta Stone, I'll just quickly show the Rosetta Stone here. Let me share my screen one more time. Here's the Rosetta Stone. Oops. Oh dear, I already gave away some of the what I was going to show. But there's the Rosetta Stone. So that was discovered in 1799, and it was, we believe it was carved in the 1st century BC. And what was so exciting to researchers and scholars when it was discovered was, you can see there at the top, it's got the classical hieroglyphs. It's got the same inscription in classical hieroglyphs on the top, then what's called Demotic script in the middle, which is a form of later kind of Egyptian script that evolved later and was used for Coptic, and people could read that. And then at the bottom is Greek, and of course scholars could read that, because that knowledge was never lost. And in fact, you had to basically understand Greek in order to even call yourself an educated person past the age of 13 back in the 1600s and 1700s. Everybody could read Greek. Maybe you can read Greek. I can't read Greek, but there it is. And so they thought, oh, this is gonna break everything open. All these wonderful hieroglyphs that we've found
Yes.
will now give up their secrets. And everybody knows the story, the teams of code breakers that tried to crack the code. And Champollion, he was only 30 or 32 years old when he said, you know what, I think each of these symbols could be not only a full word, like in Chinese characters. I know you've written some Chinese, I know you have maybe some familiarity with the Chinese system of writing, as do I. It's really beautiful and fascinating and profound.
Yeah.
The connections of what the symbol is showing. So he realized that it could be doing both that and at the same time letter sounds, and that was kind of a breakthrough. And then from there he cracked the whole thing. But once they deciphered it, they discovered there's a problem. They don't put in any vowels, which also ancient Hebrew doesn't put in any vowels, but they would use abbreviations too. And so I showed this as a little example. I talk about this in the book, but and Egyptian scholars talk about this. We have to guess basically at the pronunciation, because nobody remembers how they said it, and they would use abbreviations. And if we in English saw this abbreviation, you would immediately know, oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce that? Well, you pronounce it as street.
Yes.
But a scholar, 2,000 years from now, or 5,000, 4,000 years from now, would have a hard time coaxing street out of that ST. But we could, if in context, that could actually be different things. It could be street. We'd easily know that stands for street if it's in that context, 42nd Street. But if we saw that, then we'd know, oh, it's pronounced a different way. That's standing for something else. That's saint.
Yes.
Now, an English speaker today would have no problem with that. But in 2,000 years, if we had no vowels and all we left to people were abbreviations, they'd be like, maybe that's sat, or maybe that's satu. They wouldn't know what to say. They wouldn't know that it's street and saint. And so even the names of the gods and
I found that as well with the when I was doing my dissertation, because obviously when I was looking in the prehistoric times, all we have to look at are images, so that's even sort of less definite as to what they were trying to do. We were talking about it last time, some of the rock art and things like that. So again, it does come down to the scholar's interpretation, of course. And that's why I tried to state at the beginning that I'm approaching these I'm approaching these rock art pieces from my perspective, in terms of the theory that I have in my head that I want to that I'm interpreting it through. So again, you've got to be a decipher person, haven't you? A code breaker type of person. An interpreter.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I'm sorry. I should have stopped the screen while you were talking so that you're
okay. Yeah.
there. Yeah, but yeah, I agree. This is and so what they found was, not only is it difficult to know for us, or almost impossible for us to know exactly how the words would be pronounced today.
Yes.
But also there was no overarching explanation or text. There was no Bible full of stories. There were mostly inscriptions of kings making offerings to this or that deity, or there were the funerary, or what are kind of thought of as funerary texts, the pyramid texts being the most ancient versions, and then the Book of the Dead, those texts, which the Book of the Dead is a term that a German researcher in the late 1700s, early 1800s called it the Book of the Dead. Lepsius was his name, but the ancient Egyptians probably called it the Book of Going Forth by Day, or Coming Forth by Day. And then there's the coffin texts, and but they're all doing about the same sorts of things. They're referring to these gods and goddesses, or as they called them, Neters. Well, actually, we don't know Neteru. We don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it was, you know, the consonant N, the consonant T, and the consonant R is what they would call a god or a goddess, a Neter. And so what they exactly thought of, what we don't know exactly, because they didn't really leave us any comprehensive text. So this is all remains mysterious even
Yeah.
today.
I suppose in a way that's kind of, it's good, but it's bad at the same time, because obviously we want to understand it, but at the same time, maybe an element of it should always remain a little bit mysterious, because that's the nature of it, you know. I always think sometimes when I'm looking at the prehistoric rock art and productions of things, you know, and I just think sometimes it's nice to leave the mysteries. Sometimes, you know, it adds something more to some of these ancient ideas, and it's part of their identity, isn't it, to keep it a little bit mysterious, you know. But I was just going to say about two different things, really. I remembered what the academic piece that I was talking about before was about. It was about the Rosetta Stone, but it was also about a book from that they'd found, or some piece of work found from Turkey. I can't remember the name of the work, but what I was particularly interested in was how the king at the time had associated himself with a particular star, or the sun, for example. So what I referred to that was astral association, in the sense of the king used astronomical objects and associated himself with those objects to sort of make him seem reliable, to seem powerful and strong, that he was sort of a manifestation of those astronomical objects on Earth. You know, he was the manifestation of those. So I found that really interesting as an element of sort of religious ideas, but also political as well. You know, maybe to keep power, he wanted to associate himself. He wanted everyone to know that he was associated with a particular constellation or a particular star. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'll definitely send you that. That was the piece of it that was really interesting for me. And then also, what I find really interesting about Egypt, the one person I find interesting was Akhenaten, because I just think that maybe you have a different view of this, but the standard maybe historical narrative that has come through so far is that he seems to have had some sort of revelation or something where he changed, you know, Egyptian society, didn't he, towards his own sort of new religion in a way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my sort of understanding of what happened. I don't know too much about it, but I just wanted to see what information you had on him or anything, because I find him really interesting, that particular person.
Yeah, that's a super, super important and interesting area of research. And certainly a lot's been written about it, and a lot of different theories. And, you know, my own experience with ancient Egypt started in 1979 when the King Tut exhibit was on tour, the first time that it ever left Egypt.
Yeah.
So it was discovered actually this time of year in
Right.
the very early 1900s. And it was the first basically intact tomb to be
Yeah.
discovered. And you know, that whole story is very intriguing and interesting. And when Howard Carter peered inside, you know, when they finally broke the seal after clearing out the passageway, and they said, "Can you see anything in there?" And he, you know, he's looking in there with his flashlight through the little hole that he's drilled in the wall, and he says, "Yes, wonderful things, wonderful things." Well, that exhibit came around in 1979. I was quite young, but it made a huge impression on me. I went and saw it in San Francisco. I remember exactly where. I remember standing in line at the
Yeah.
Palace of Fine Arts there in Golden Gate Park, and with my class.
Yes.
Children in school. Anyway, he is thought to have been Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun. That's the and actually he was thought to have been called Tutank-Aten for the first several years of his life, and then he reinstated the worship of Amun and all the priests of Amun, and then his name was changed to Tutankhamun, and the cartouches and the hieroglyphs were changed, and you can, scholars can see this. So, that first thing that you were talking about, this relates really to the question of the king, or what you were saying about politics and identifying with something celestial.
Yes.
I would put it slightly differently, or I would offer a slightly different perspective on what may be going on.
Okay.
Because I've thought about this a lot. Because what does this celestial realm represent? It represents the realm of the gods, or it shows us the realm of the gods. The realm of the gods is invisible, but we learn about it through this metaphorical system. Whoever gave this to the world, this system that predates ancient Egypt, because it's in the most ancient text that we have from ancient Egypt. It's in the most ancient text that we have from ancient India. It predates the ancient Mesopotamia. It predates, but in this system, what I believe is going on is we are being shown, quote unquote, shown the invisible world through a visible. It's not that the gods are the stars. It's not that the sun is a god or that this constellation is a god, but it's through that constellation that we learn the characteristics of this invisible force, this neter. And we can explore what neter might mean. But it's like, where does life come from? If I put a seed in the ground and it grows into a plant, how did that happen? I put water on it. Sunshine had to hit it at some point, had to have the right kind of soil, but we still can't replicate, we can't make something non-living grow into a redwood tree. No scientist can do that. No scientist can give life to something that's lifeless. And yet when a baby is born, where does that life come from? Well, it comes from the realm of the gods. It comes from the invisible realm. It comes from somewhere other. We have to acknowledge that there's some force, some realm, some dimension that's beyond this one, because we all know the difference between living matter and non-living matter. And when something is born and it has life, whether it's an animal or a plant or a person, we recognize that comes from the divine realm. And all these gifts that are given to men and women come from the divine realm. And in the myths, if a man or a woman proclaims that they are better than the gods at some skill, oh, that woman is more beautiful than the goddess of beauty. This happens in myths, right? And then it turns into a disaster for the whole town, because they haven't acknowledged, they have inverted the order and said, oh, we down here, this physical, this human, this mortal is greater than the source of that gift. And that's an inversion. And so it turns out, always something bad happens when that order is misplaced. So I'm getting back to this idea of the king. So where are those gifts from? They're from the gods. Where are the gifts to a nation? Where do they come from? The wonderful rivers, which sustain life because we need fresh water. The wonderful forests that give us wood to build things or make guitars or whatever. All those gifts, the crops. In the ancient world, they were ascribed to different gods and goddesses, right? The goddess of the grain in ancient Rome was Ceres, or Demeter in ancient Greece, and the crops came from her, and she threatened to withhold the crops if she didn't get her daughter back at one point. Remember that? And so, and the riches under the earth, all the oil that everybody goes and squabbles over and fights over and causes terrible conflicts over, belonged to the god of the underworld, who was called the wealthy one. He was called, they didn't want to say his name, so they would call him Pluton or Pluto, the wealthy god. So if all those things came from the gods, they came from the invisible world. The king, I would argue, the role of the king was to protect those things. He's identifying with the invisible realm because his job is to those are the gifts to the people.
Yeah.
And they can get gobbled up by oligarchs. Aristotle talks about this. He says, democracy tends to devolve into oligarchy. And we see that happening. and we're in the middle of a democratic, crisis here in the United States, right? Or argument, polarization.
Mm.
I would argue that the role of democracy is also to do the same thing as the role of a king in the ancient times. Either one is supposed to protect from oligarchy. And what's oligarchy? That's where some group of people says, oh, these gifts from the gods just belong to me, my little group, and not to the people that they were given to. They were given to the people of the land. And so the king's job, I would argue, was to prevent that oligarchy from happening, because oligarchy is kind of a natural tendency. If you take your hands off, it'll just devolve into oligarchy.
Yes.
And if you don't have a strong democracy, you'll end up with oligarchy. Or if you don't have a king, and a king can of course facilitate oligarchy and tyranny and all those things, but the job of a king was supposed to be to protect those resources. And why did he associate himself with the gods, or the queen herself with the gods and goddesses? Because the gods and goddesses were the source of those gifts. And the king was supposed to be the representative to make sure that those gifts are benefiting all the people, not just that little group. And we see this tension in the ancient writings. Anyway, so that's what I think that's one way that I would look at it. And I think it's a super important topic because it's right up to today.
Yeah, it has so much relevance, and you can see that when we do talk about even the most prehistoric things, that they seem so far away and they are in time, but a lot of the fundamental principles still affect us today, don't they? They may be in different forms, but we've still got the same problems.
Yeah, for
People
sure.
stealing each other's crops, people do, it's just different things, but the fundamental is the same.
That's right.
So I was just thinking about, so do you sort of see the astronomical world, the celestial world then, as sort of the kind of like the mediator? Is that a good way to understand it for people? If is that the mediator between the terrestrial world and sort of the invisible divine world? Because when we're thinking about the stars, we obviously, the further we go out, there's galaxies, there's other phenomena out there. I mean, I'm going into something totally different here, but I just find it interesting to ask you about, what do you see as the role then of the everything that is beyond the earth, I suppose, from our perspective as humans?
Right. Yeah. I know you have a lot of feelings and thoughts about that we we can get into.
Yes.
So my understanding is that the moon, there's the famous Buddhist saying of the finger pointing to the moon.
Yeah.
Don't focus on the finger or you'll miss all that heavenly glory, right? That's in the Bruce Lee movie of Enter the Dragon, but it's a Buddhist saying that you don't want to focus on the finger or you'll miss the moon. The finger is just pointing you to the moon. Don't focus on the thing that's pointing, focus on what it's pointing towards.
Yes.
And so then the question is, okay, what's the moon? It's a big rock.
Yeah.
That's spinning around the earth.
Yeah.
So what, we're supposed to look at that? Well, the moon itself is a finger, I would argue, pointing to something else. It's not the moon that the ancients are worshiping. It's something in the invisible realm that the moon mediates for us, to use your term. Yes. And I would say that what it's pointing us towards, this invisible realm, has to do with something that's actually inside of us, the self, the higher self that we find in all the myths. I argue this kind of at length in my most recent book, and I'm always trying to articulate it better, and I'll write about it more. But my most recent book, Myth and Trauma, is all about trauma is separation from the self. Most fundamentally is separation from who we are. It's self-alienation. It's division from who we are. And so getting back to who we are opens us up to that whole realm. I would argue that when when we see someone like Odysseus get a message from the gods, or someone in Perseus is going to try and fight the Gorgons, and he is intercepted by Athena and Hermes, and they say, hold on, if you don't listen to us, you will not succeed. What does that mean? How does he get that message from the divine realm? He gets it through, I would argue, when we're in touch with ourself, then we're open more to that other realm. So I'm not arguing that the moon doesn't have impact on us here physically and spiritually. It does. But these constellations are not the gods themselves. They're pointing us to the gods who are in a different realm, and they're actually inside of us. The ancient Egyptians show us that the gods and goddesses work their way out through men and women. If you read remember I said that we don't have this comprehensive Bible from ancient Egypt, but we have these funerary texts like the pyramid texts or the coffin texts or the Book of the Dead.
Yes.
And if you read those, they will have these profound things like the eyes of, and then they'll put the name of the deceased person.
Yeah.
Are the eyes of this god or goddess. The mouth of, and they'll put his name or her name, is the mouth of this different god or goddess. The neck is the neck of Isis. The chest is the chest of Set, the brother of Osiris. Or I forget exactly which one lines up with which in the pyramid text or the Book of the Dead. But what is that saying? Somehow the gods are working their way out through us. And it even says there is no part of my body that's devoid of a god or a netter. So somehow, and that's what we see also in the Greek myths. Like Perseus has to slay the Gorgons. Athena and Hermes don't come up to him and say, okay, Perseus, Gorgons are too hard for you to handle. Wait right here. I'll go do your mission for you, and I'll come back with the head of Medusa in a bag so that it doesn't turn you to stone. That's not what they say. They say, listen, you're going to have to do this, but if you do it the way you think you're going to do it, you're going to lose. But if you do it the way we say, if you follow our advice, you may have a chance of success. But who still has to go do it? Perseus.
Yeah.
They don't do it for him. They inspire him. So the gods and goddesses work through us and inspire us and enable us to attain our full potential.
Yes.
Perseus would not have attained his full potential without listening to the gods that came and spoke to him. And how did he do that? I would argue it's through reconnecting with self, but we've been alienated from self. And we see this over and over in the different myths.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love this topic because I think it's just so relevant for me and what I do with astronism and all my other theories. But I suppose maybe that's why what I've found is that astronism is becoming more popular with people who are atheists, but also agnostic as well, because they prefer to. They would probably prefer the idea that that they can see. They'd rather focus on something that they can see rather than something that they can't see. So when you're talking about the invisible world or the invisible realm, for example, or even the spiritual realm or whatever you want to call it, I'm just thinking about some people I know who are sort of on board with what I'm thinking. They would sort of step back from that because they only really want to focus on what they can see. And so, I think I just think that's quite interesting. And it's just clicked in my brain as to why astronomy might be more popular amongst those types of people, because we do generally, we want to focus on the, without also, I get what you're saying about the finger and the moon as well, though, without sort of focusing on the finger, and then not focus on what it's pointing at. But for me, I think I do sort of see the astronomical world, the cosmos, whatever you wish to call it, sort of, I see that as the moon. I see that as the sort of the thing to connect with. Whether there is something beyond that is something that I talk about often, of course. But I was just going to ask you about whether you'd read that, whether you'd looked at that link or not, and what comments you had, or be honest, or whatever you think about it. It's obviously it's a work in progress. Basically, to fill people in, I just sent David a link to an explanation of what astronism is. It's kind of outdated now a little bit. It was written a couple of months ago now, so probably certain things have become more emphasized since I wrote that. But it does give you a good overview of the general point. So I wanted to know what David had to say about it, and whether you had read it or not. So yeah, whether you had any comments.
Yeah, well, obviously you've done a huge amount of work, and it's something that started when you were quite young, it looks like. You've been really,
15.
so, that's why I don't ever want to dissuade someone from following what their self is leading them towards, or what the
Yeah,
gods are, the gods are trying to say through them, right? What we just talked about. So
yeah,
I don't really interact with living researchers that much.
yeah. You were saying
Actually,
that
there's
last
a
time.
danger there, because I
Yeah,
think it's best to let everybody do their thing and publish their stuff. And people reach out to me a lot of times with their different theories, and I think it's almost best for me to say, do your theory and publish your work, and I'll interact with it, but I don't want to dissuade someone or step. It's like, in Star Trek, when they go around to different planets, they don't interfere, or they're
yeah,
supposed to not interfere.
yeah. I
We,
got
in our family, we just watched My Octopus Teacher. Did you see that yet? It's
no.
really good. My Octopus Teacher. And he
Oh,
doesn't want to interfere with what's going on, even though he really wants to sometimes.
yeah,
I don't want to, but what's really interesting in that, what made me think of that movie, and I'll probably write a blog post about it eventually, but one thing it's like, how did this all come about? He says it's almost like the forest is an entity, this underwater forest, this kelp forest, where all these creatures, amazing interactions are going on. He says it's almost like the whole thing is a living entity that created this world.
yeah,
At one point, he doesn't say it exactly like that, but it's
yeah.
a little bit like what you're describing of the universe. How did this all come about?
Yes.
Well, I certainly don't know. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
People who have gone into kind of hard atheism and hard skepticism would probably disagree with some of the things that I am saying about, the realm of the gods. But where is that realm of the gods? And how do we even have consciousness
Yeah.
is a very impossible question so far to answer.
Yeah.
And where this all came from, and how life happens when we plant a seed in the ground is a tremendous mystery. And so where it comes from, I'm talking about what the ancient myths are talking about,
Yeah.
and what I think they mean to us today.
Yeah.
But as long as it's something that you are doing, that you feel led to do, I don't ever want to step on that seed that someone else is doing. It's not, is someone leading you? is
I
someone
do.
is someone telling you to start a religion? Some other person? If it's just you, I think that's
Oh,
great.
me. It's just my vocation, it seems that it's become, and I didn't think that it would do, but and you don't sort of set out to do that. It just happens, and it's more of a natural thing, really, that you don't, I just think that there needs to be some sort of more organized system that really helps to guide people, because I don't think there is that yet. I can't. If there was that, then I would have joined something else already. That's what I found, and it's kind of that's similar when anyone ever does something new, isn't it? You create something new because it's not been done before, or it's not, or what is there already isn't quite sufficient, or isn't quite how you want it to be. So that's why I've created Astronism, and why I'm sort of continuing with it. because there wasn't something else for me to join. I didn't really find, there are other similar movements, but to me, I had a very specific vision of what I wanted to sort of be part of. So that's why I'm doing that. But it is interesting because I do, even though you're not specifically talking in the terminology that I use, when you talk about the self, when you were saying about the self before, my interpretation of that is what I would call astronality, which you may have seen from the, from the post that I sent. So it's, when you're using your terminology, all I do is just convert it into what my terminology is. And then I'm sort of on board with, and it's the same ideas, really. They're not too far apart, really. So I do think sometimes it is a question of terms. And I think a lot of religious wars and disputes have come about because of a discrepancy over terms, when really the essence of what you're actually talking about, trying to get to some sort of truth and knowledge and an understanding, they are the fundamental basis. Whereas we just attach words, don't we, our own terminology to certain ideas. But I just, that's why I'm doing it. And I just think, I mean, I don't know whether you've seen sort of other movements similar to what I'm doing, but to me, there just needs to be one that's more organized, and that sort of leads on to what I wanted to talk about in terms of sort of how you see sort of your ideas and theories and the work that you do impacting the contemporary world, but also the future. Do you, I mean, what is your ambition for them, I suppose? And I think I've asked this in the last podcast, but I kind of want to try and get down to what is it that you want to achieve? Because I feel like the way that I write things, and you'll see on my websites and different things like that, I feel like it's pretty clear what I want to achieve. I want to set up a system of belief that people can engage with, like other isms, but one that really represents the stars and really represents sort of an astronomical view of things, a celestial view of things that is all about it. What we would say cosmocentric, because I don't think that exists yet, in the sense of, yes, other religions are based on that, but they don't use those terminologies, do they? They don't use astronomical terminologies. They've moved away from that because they don't want to be, seen as pagan or whatever. So I just think that there needs to be some system that people can identify with. I don't know what your opinions are on that, but
Yeah, no, it's a big subject. But what I was, if you're led to do that, if it helps people, I guess one metaphor, I like to use metaphors, as you could probably tell, and I think it's helpful for me. That's how I guess process things. But like a kung fu system or a martial arts system, this is another reason why I don't necessarily interact too much with what other people are doing, because if someone's following let's say someone's a kung fu master of one style and I'm a kung fu master of another style, it's good for us to talk to one another, but really we're probably not going to change. I don't want to change what that person's doing.
Yeah.
Because they're in a different style and it's working for them. I think what's important is, does it work? Does it work? And so it's not just words. I mean, I know you weren't saying it's all just words, but the terminology is one thing, but is it effective to help people? And so if what you're doing helps people, certain people might gravitate towards one martial arts style, or find that martial arts style helps them, is effective for them.
Yes.
Take a sip. But and maybe people do create new martial arts styles. They say, this isn't working, what I'm looking for isn't out there, and I'm going to create a new one, and if it helps people and it works, then I think that's good. You know, as long as you're not being led to start. I think the hesitancy I have is my understanding of religion. It goes back to ancient times, and the creating of new religions is sometimes done for nefarious purposes, or
Oh.
has been done by, I think that literalist Christianity has um, a very fraught history,
Yes.
but it is clearly connected with the overthrow of the ancient gods and of the ancient empire,
Yeah.
and was used as a tool, a political tool. I mean, I don't think anyone can dispute that it, you know, had political ramifications and impacts.
Yeah.
And I think the creation of religions can be done
Yeah.
for, you know, cynical purposes.
Mm.
And so when you go to a country like Taiwan, where there's still traditional religion, there's still temples with the gods and goddesses, and the
Yeah.
grandmothers will show their grandchildren. The grandchildren will just learn basically by watching what their grandparents do when they go and they burn incense and they do certain traditions. It just gets passed on organically.
Yes. Yes.
And why don't we have that in the West? Because Christianity came in and smashed that. That was the way every culture passed it down, and nobody came from originally Christianity. You know, in England there was gods and goddesses, and in Northern Europe there was, you know, it was related to basically what we have in the Norse myths, maybe some slight variations on the names and the stories, but then Christianity came in and basically stamped that out. And in France, they had some, and wherever the ancients went, they said, oh, this god that they worship, that's our Mars, or that's our Mercury. They knew that it was all connected. And I can show that the Egyptian system is connected to the system in the Bible, to the system in ancient India, to the system in China, to the system in the North America and South America and Central America. It's an ancient system. So,
Yes.
and and if it's helping and telling the truth and working for people, then I think that's
Yeah.
and I think Christianity is built on ancient scriptures and has the ability to get people to the truth
Yes.
of reconnecting with their higher self. The terminology they use doesn't matter if you're reconnecting with your higher self. But if it's being used to divide people and oppress people and take away their resources and create oligopolies, like I talked about earlier, then that's a problem. And it's definitely been used for that. There's no doubt it's been used for that. And it's also been used to stamp out traditional. So that's where I'm hesitant. And also the other thing, and so now I'll wind back to astronism. The thing that I think was the tremendous loss that happened with literalism was externalizing. So I talked about that this is all the invisible realm. You find it by going inside.
Yes.
Inside, or it works its way out through men and women. And this reconnecting with the self, I can only be the only one who can reconnect with myself. No one can do it for me. And so looking outward to an external teacher or object or anything else will, if the reconnection has to happen inside of me, saying you have to accept this external doctrine, or you have to accept this external savior. And then once you've done that, everything's okay. You may not have reconnected with yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? You may have followed somebody's external dictum or dogma or whatever, and not really gotten to the heart of it, which is reconnecting with yourself, which reconnects you with the invisible realm, reconnects you with other people, reconnects you with nature and the universe and the cosmos, all those things. But if we're just focusing externally, and that's what I think literalism does, by its very nature, it says, oh, this is historical, this happened. Oh, you don't believe it? You don't believe Moses crossed the Red Sea? Okay, that puts you on the other side from me. And I would say that's external, right? We're talking about an external Moses or an external Jesus.
Yes.
And so that's, if I, you said, be honest, if I had to voice a concern,
Yes.
you know, I'm concerned with creating religions, but if you're called to do that, and if it helps people, it's like creating, I could say it's like creating Kung Fu, but the concern I would have is if it's focusing externally, like we realize our potential by going to the stars or something external. What if someone can't do that? You and I maybe can go to the stars, but let's say our grandparents are too old and the technology is not going to get there. Is their life, not fulfilled because they didn't explore the stars? No, because the gods are always available. They're always present. The self is always available, but it's not easy to find. It's buried, like Osiris in the ancient Egypt has to go down to the underworld, and then Isis has to look everywhere to find him. That's a picture of recovering the self. And then we find it in tradition and myth after myth after myth. The buried god or the buried goddess Inanna goes down to the underworld, as I mentioned probably before. So I do get uncomfortable when I see an external focus, because I think that ultimately that's the inversion that literalist Christianity put on the ancient system. I think the ancient system was teaching us to connect with ourselves, and then that got diverted.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. We probably don't even have enough time. I don't know. Just let me know when you need to go. But I think the reason why that is because astronism is sort of what I would call anti-anthropocentric. It is not about really, and this is just a philosophical divergence, if you will. And first of all, I would say that astronism isn't just a religion. It's a lot of different things, and I don't think there's a word yet that really describes what it is. I'm working on that right now. I don't think that the word religion really encompasses it in its entirety, and I don't think it does it justice just to call it that. But sometimes I do call it that for the sake of giving people an understanding or some sort of comprehension of what it is. So that's probably the first thing. But the second thing was that the reason why we want to focus on sort of these external entities is because in the sort of, especially in Christianity, I think it comes from a lot, is that there is an anthropocentricness or anthropocentrism that is just so, to me, was just so toxifying, completely self-serving, completely inward-looking. And I think that if you are too inward-looking, you can sort of make yourself seem too significant. And so, and this is just sort of from my philosophical basis, that's why we focus on cosmocentrism. We're trying to redirect where the focus is, which is sort of maybe totally sort of diverging from what you, maybe your philosophical stance is. But
actually, that's really interesting.
I just think that
that is an important point.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. I just think that the anthropocentricity that has come about, I think that's made us less knowledgeable, less just more egocentric in a way, in the sense that for example, Jesus became man, so God became man. God became human. I mean, that itself is so anthropocentric, isn't it? It's sort of, well, God has chosen us. This is why in Christianity they won't accept the existence of other life that may or may not be more intelligent than us. That's why, because we were chosen and we are the ones who, there is no one else, because we are here and God made this planet for us. So there's a huge amount of diversion there in that. But I just think that it's become so toxic, this sort of anthropocentricity, that what astronomism's trying to do is trying to say, no, we want to steer the other way. This is the way that we need to be steering, is that we're not very significant at all, both as individuals and as even a planet, really. And it's really, rather than putting us at the center, it's putting the cosmos at the center. So that's
right.
why, we're doing that. But I get where you're coming from in the sense of a personal way. It's very hard to do that. Humans like to be at the center. It might not be very helpful in that way to some people, because they want to feel important, they want to feel significant, they want to feel loved and by God and things like that. So it is very different in that way.
Yeah, well, actually, maybe there are I think there are some real points of connection here. What we're both looking at and dealing with, I think, is a vacuum or a problem that was created, I would argue, by basically an event, a takeover, literalist Christianity, taking over the ancient traditions and myths, and original instructions is what Peter Kingsley calls them, the original instructions that were given to every culture or preserved by every culture, maybe from some predecessor culture, I think most likely. And so you're saying there's this vacuum, and this vacuum involves what you're expressing, the way I would reprocess or express what you're saying, is this disconnect from the cosmos, this disconnect from nature, this idea that, oh yeah, we can exploit and destroy because we're the center of everything. That is, I would argue, a symptom of this schism that happened when literalism came in and destroyed it. Because in the ancient Greek, you can find, I've blogged about this at some point, a multitude of variety of this concept that every fountain has its nymph, every tree has its dryad, every stream has its different deity.
Yes.
In the ancient, some ancient texts talk about, you don't cross a river without giving a thought in your mind to the god or goddess that gave that river or owns that river or to whom it belongs, or inhabits that river with its spirit. That connection was split and divided by this monotheistic, and we can get into Akhenaten maybe another time, but I talk about Akhenaten in the ancient worldwide system because although he is argued to be monotheistic, he's clearly using the ancient system too, which is very interesting. So, but what I think we're both dealing with is this vacuum, this problem, this disconnect. And I'm saying we can go back to the ancient wisdom that was given to every culture as this precious inheritance and find things there that can be extremely applicable in the very present moment. Absolutely, we need it. And you're saying that I'm not finding what I need. We need to reconnect with the universe. And I would argue that when you reconnect with self, you also, this schism is a division from the self, from others, and from the cosmos, from nature, from the animals and plants. In My Octopus Teacher, that's kind of the central dilemma that he feels, is he's outside of nature and he encounters people who are within nature, connected to nature. And he says, I want that. I'm missing that. And that's the whole thing of this movie. And that's what you're expressing when you're saying, I want to be reconnected. And I would say, I think that's absolutely, we all feel that. I totally agree. And so you're creating a Kung Fu system to deal with a problem, to help people. And I'm saying there's also these ancient systems that are available that worked in ancient times, but it's very hard to get those back. But the concepts we can still bring into our lives.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also, what I would argue as well is, from an astronist point of view, that back in prehistoric times particularly, was that they were sort of thinking in the same way that the sort of I do now, in the sense that their lives were revolving around the cosmos. Their agriculture was dependent upon the stars and the movements of the stars, and the way they depicted the cosmos and different astronomical objects. So that really, I kind of think the same as you, in the sense that we do need to go back to some of these more ancient and prehistoric systems and sort of reassemble those, though, for the present day. For example, we are on the cusp of space exploration, and that is a huge part of, obviously, astronism and the spiritual, philosophical, religious, whatever you want to call it, the impacts of space exploration on those topics and beliefs that are involved in that. And so, yeah, obviously in prehistoric times, they had no concept that they'd be able to explore space, but we do now. And so what does that mean? And what are the ethics of that? You know, should we be exploring space really? Or are we just going to ruin it in the same way that we have this planet, you could argue? So, but I suppose in astronomism, the point to make is, really at the beginning of it, you have to reduce yourself in a way. You were saying about maybe our grandparents won't be able to explore the stars. They can explore the stars intellectually and sort of on a spiritual level and a interpersonal level. But yeah, you're right. They won't be able to, and I probably won't be able to explore them physically, because it's going to take so long to do so. But again, you have to try and reduce yourself and think about sort of a greater cause, if you will, and think, I'll contribute as much as I can to the cause of space exploration, for future generations to enjoy. You know, that's sort of how we would perceive that. It's like contribution, contributing to this sort of endeavor. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to this sort of reduction, in a way, reducing us to what we actually are. Yes, we have personal and emotional things that we want to improve ourselves and like you were saying, come to the self, but also at the same time understanding that you are just one person on one planet, in one solar system, amongst billions of solar systems and trillions or countless, possibly infinite solar systems, in the universe. And so you have to put it into that perspective as well. How much do you really matter? I think that is really profound and something that really has to be looked at, and really has to be considered. How much are we willing to put into ourselves and focus on ourselves, when really, should we really be focusing on what is higher than us and what is sort of where the wisdom does come from, I suppose, but yeah, it's all interesting. It's all
Yeah, no, right. I think it's a really important question, and I really appreciate how you just expressed it there.
Yeah.
And I would also submit this idea for consideration by all those watching, and you, that so connecting with self, mostly in my most recent book.
Yes.
But I've been moving towards this, in previous books too, is connecting to these therapists and teachers, the things that they're saying about the importance of reconnecting with self and why it's so important.
Yeah.
But even before, I could see that the twins in these different myths is not two different people. It's talking about reconnecting with a certain part of yourself. And even in the most ancient myths, the Gilgamesh texts, which are very ancient, we have this picture of Enkidu who lives among the wild animals, and he's part of nature. And then there's a schism when he becomes civilized, when he meets Shamhat, the temple prostitute from the city that's been sent to seduce him. Then he is divided from nature. And this is in the most ancient myths, that we have physical record of, along with the pyramid texts and writings from China and India. These are very, very ancient. That concept of the schism from the natural world, and suddenly the animals run away from him, and he finds, oh, they're not my companions anymore. I've lost something. But then how does he reconnect? He goes on a new quest to meet Gilgamesh, and they wrestle, and then they become almost brothers in almost one person. He's reconnecting with self. That's how something's been lost.
Yes.
And if we're connected with self, then that we can't go back. Enkidu can't go back to the way he was. He realizes something's been lost, and we can't just undo it. But connecting with self, and so what I was talking about with the healers, like Dr. Richard Schwartz has discovered this system that he calls IFS, internal family systems, where we have polarizations in our mind of, this protector, this firefighter, that because there's some trauma that they're trying to protect. Well, that's how we become polarized, and that's how we become callous to other people's suffering. Is, well, we'll excuse it with, well, that person did something immoral, and that's why I don't need to help them. Or, it's some kind of it's a defense mechanism, but it's wrong. The self, he finds evidence after talking to thousands of patients that everyone has self, this thing called self that's beneath all the protectors, that's been suppressed. But when it comes into play, it can heal those hurts, those exiles that the protectors are protecting. Okay, why am I talking about this? Because if we're acting out of polarized protectors, what you see in the United States right now is intense polarization. And people are polarized because they're afraid, or because when we're acting out of self, we're curious and courageous and compassionate, and we're caring and connected to the universe. But when we're disconnected from self, that's when we get polarized, and that's when we say, oh, we get greedy. Oh, I need more of those resources. Like King Midas. King Midas in the myths he was a king. He was a wealthy king. He was asked by the gods, what do you want? And what did he say? I want more wealth. What's wrong with him? He's insecure somehow, deeply, deeply insecure. If he's got all the wealth of a king, and yet now he wants everything he touches to turn to gold. And of course, that turns out terribly for him. But what I'm saying is, why? Let's psychoanalyze King Midas. What is your problem, man? Obviously he has some, he's a mythical character. I can show that he's based in the stars. But if he were a person, he's exhibiting something that we have, where we've already got enough, but we don't feel secure. Why not? Because we're not in self. There's some trauma there. And so, I agree with all the things that you said, but the perspective I would add to it is that going inside self, or recovering self, going inside to figure out what's going on in there, and to heal those traumas, is not self-centered, because when we are connected with self, then we're connected more with universe and with others. But when we're polarized, we can go into space. If everybody's polarized and not in connection with self, we're going to go mess everything up. In space is as bad as, it's like, no matter where you move, your problems are going to follow you. If you're not connected to self, moving to a different place might feel like it gives you a new life, but unless you reconnect with self, you won't fix the problems that cause the problem in the other
Yeah.
place. So that's the other perspective I would add, that connecting with self does heal this problem,
Yeah.
I think, of polarization. And that's how the ancient myths can help us with the problems of right now.
Yes. That's a brilliant perspective on sort of what I was saying before. Yeah, I love that. It's something for me to think about as well when, you know, someone else brings another perspective on it. You know, I'm not sort of concrete in everything that I say, and I am open to obviously different perspectives and sort of explore. This is what it's for. Astronism really is just for me, and for anyone else who follows it, it's just an arena to a vehicle to really explore these ideas that maybe hadn't existed before, or for other people they particularly resonate with it. You know, it's just a vehicle, an arena, you know, when the painter gets the canvas, it's like a canvas to explore these ideas, and that's what it should be. And we're all trying to achieve the greatest sense of self and the greatest truths, and we all want to know perhaps what might happen after we die, or what happened before the Big Bang, and these types, and why the universe is here. We all want to discover those things, but I think we have to, possibly the systems that are most dominant now, the religious systems, spiritual systems, possibly philosophical systems, and definitely the political systems, but perhaps they are not sufficient enough to really you know, explore in the sense that we're talking in an astronomical way, in a celestial way, in a cosmocentric way. That's why I want to bring astronomism and other similar movements to the forefront. You know, that's why I do think it needs something, whether it's what I do or someone else comes along doing it. There does need to be some canvas, a new canvas brought forward, because you can't have, you know, if we're having these discussions in a Christian context, you just can't have them, because there are pre-established notions, they are pre-established beliefs that are brick walls that you cannot get through, you know, with some systems, aren't there? You know, for example, like I was saying before about, you know, us being a chosen people, us being a chosen species by God, that creates barriers to me. That creates obstacles to really understanding the nature of the universe. If we consider ourselves as chosen, you know, we're sort of, I don't know, I think it really depends. Conversations and dialogue really depend on in what arena are you having those? In what context are you having them? Are you having it in a Christian context, or a secular one, or an atheistic one? And I just don't think up to now, especially in the modern context, there is a sufficient arena to discuss what we do. And this is why we have to have these discussions, isn't it? And these conversations on podcasts. And this is why I have conversations with other people. You know, the dominant faiths of the day perhaps don't provide that, you know, and they didn't for me. And that's why I have, you know, wanting to create Astronism, because they just didn't do it for me. They don't provide the opportunity to answer the questions that I have, put it that way.
Right. Well, you know, you bring up a really interesting point of being on the verge of being able to go to the, you know, other planets or to the stars.
Yeah.
And what happened when Europeans went to the quote New World, which of course was already populated by all these cultures who had ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
And the arrival of the European colonizers was in a very specific imperialistic and Christian literalistic context that said it's okay to destroy all the, burn the texts of the ancient Maya, which is what happened.
Mm.
A
Yeah.
an unspeakable loss,
Yes.
and destroy those cultures and oppress those people and impose tyranny. And that was all basically done in a literalist, it was the literalist understanding that led to that. And that sort of literalist understanding continues to lead to
Yes.
different kinds of wars and exploitations and oppressions around the world. And so it is certainly a real issue, for our own planet and for moving out into other,
Yes.
other space in the world, in the universe.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
for sure. So I'm just very careful not to try and influence what you're led to do. I think
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is create or help people, create
Yeah.
ways to help
Yeah.
ourselves understand what's going on and help others.
Yes.
And if it's helpful, I guess you could say, well, helpful towards what? Helpful towards positive things,
Yeah.
helpful towards connecting with self and overcoming trauma is what I'm really motivated
Okay.
right now to explore. And I think that, is connected to all these other issues too.
Yeah, I suppose this is one of the last questions I want to ask is sort of, in the future, perhaps someone may come along after that you passed away, for example, and they may sort of collect your text and sort of want to sort of make it into something sort of more organized. Say, yeah, this guy really had an opportunity to, and had the right ideas. I suppose, maybe that might happen in the future. Your ideas might
I
be
don't know.
something a little bit more, something a little bit more organized. It should be really interesting, wouldn't it? And I support anyone who's thinking in a astronomical way, in a celestial way, in whatever word you want to use. Anyone who is sort of on that same level, that's all we need to really focus on, isn't it? Really, and especially with looking at the ancient wisdom and and trying to revive that in the modern world, because obviously a lot of young people today don't know a lot of this stuff. They're not taught some of the truths that we've been talking about and some of the theories that we've been discussing, are they? So there is a real practical endeavor that I feel I need to be involved with, and I am sort of involved with, in trying to spread these ideas, and you are as well, and trying to show kids as well, that the beauty really of some of these ancient civilizations that we've been talking about. I mean, I don't know what the American system is like, but here, in the UK, history, they don't really focus on prehistoric or ancient times, and it's certainly not, from an astronomical celestial emphasis there. So maybe one day they'll get to that. I don't know, but it would be great, to see that more. Yeah.
No, those are really interesting points. I mean, in terms of, I am trying to make an organized, presentation of what I believe, but I think what you mean by organized is like, so I would say, my mother is a Montessori teacher. She's run Montessori schools for decades, and Montessori is a system or a way, an approach to. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. No, new word.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating because it is esoteric in nature, in that it uses physical tools to teach mathematical concepts or grammatical concepts. It's very amazing, really. Like they have a cube that represents a binomial. So you learn the cube, and then later you learn the application to multiplying binomials, squaring binomials or cubing binomials, and trinomials too. And that's a form of esotericism. But what I was going to say is there's also another educational system called Waldorf. I don't know if you've heard of that one either. Waldorf schools.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I think, descended from Rudolf Steiner, the philosopher Rudolf Steiner. And in Waldorf schools, the reason I bring it up is that I believe that in maybe 4th grade, the children all learn the Greek myths.
Yes.
And in 5th grade, they all learn the Norse myths.
Mm.
I may have the ages incorrect. It may be 6th grade and 7th grade, but whatever.
Yes.
That strikes me as extremely, extremely helpful. It's like the binomial cube or the trinomial cube. You don't have to understand how to cube a trinomial to first play with the cube and learn its kind of rules and its patterns. And then later someone says to you, now, do you understand what you've just been doing all these years? Well, I think so. Well, let me show you. There's a whole nother dimension to it. And then they show you, and then you say, oh, wow. And I already understand it. Well, that can happen with the myths too. If you learn them as a young person and ingest them, then later you can learn, more dimensions to them. And so I think that there is something to be said for incorporating that or giving people a way to incorporate that in their lives. I'm not trying to set myself up as an authority where I try and point people to the myths. And people say, oh, do you think this or do you think that? Who cares what I think? I may be wrong, but I can tell you out of my ego something, and I can totally steer you wrong. So go to the myths because the answers are there, and actually yourself that the myths are pointing to actually has the answers for you. And so that's kind of what I'm motivated out of, at least right now, to I want to listen more to myself, which I do believe that myself, as I get more in contact with self, I am being led in ways that I wasn't, 20 years ago. So that feels good. But to help others with that, I try and point towards ways they can incorporate the myths. But certainly giving kind of more structure or tools to people would be it's a good suggestion, and I appreciate that.
Good step forward. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and from some of the things you've just said there, I'm gonna definitely watch them back and really digest those, because I think they'll really help me as well, from some of the things you've said. So I suppose coming to the end of it, today's episode, I suppose, what is your main research area at the moment? Are you able to share that with me in terms of what are you most excited for at the moment? What are you most sort of thinking about, or what is some of the things that are coming up for you that maybe people can watch out for, maybe?
Right. Well, I'm really trying to learn more about this system of IFS. I'm reading and rereading Dr. Schwartz's book because it really resonates to me. These things that these cutting edge healers like Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Richard Schwartz and others that are helping people with trauma, I really think that the ancient myths are talking about that same thing. That's one of their central purposes. I'm not a trained therapist, so I don't go, give people therapy, but I think it's a tremendous tool. The things, we talked about it a little bit, this vacuum that people feel because of what you talked about. Because I think the ancient wisdom was deliberately subverted. So what people are finding when they get deep into yoga, which is it's not just postures, it's a whole philosophy. They're connecting with the ancient wisdom and with self, and all the myths of India that are still informing today are a tool. They're a resource. They can help. And so that's somehow the myths are, I think, a resource. You don't have to use the myths. You can get back to self without the myths.
Yes.
But they're a tremendous resource. So why wouldn't you use them if if they're there? So helping people to do that, helping kind of get more able to do that. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I'm always constantly kind of exploring right now. But how about you? I mean, you're
I'm just about to start my PhD. So I handed my proposal in maybe a week and a half ago. Sorry, 2 weeks ago. And then I had my interview. And so I'm just about to start embarking on the reading for it in freedom of religion. And yeah, I'm really excited. It's the next huge phase of research for me. So I'm obviously moving into another direction away from what my dissertation was about, but yeah, really excited for the upcoming things, and obviously hope we'll keep in touch and can keep sharing those with you, and we'll keep having more conversations. At some point I want to get back to the topic of my dissertation, and there's so much more for me to do there, and a lot more work to be done. The dissertation only sort of got the surface level, really. But yeah, really excited for PhD, and looking forward to getting on with it, really.
Yeah, that is exciting. That is exciting. I hope there's a way that your dissertation that you've done for your master's can inform where you go with the PhD. And I would I would venture to guess that, where you start off pointing towards and where you finish, you may find some. I find that when I'm writing a book sometimes, by the end I'm like, well, this isn't quite where I necessarily, I had an outline, but there were some discoveries along the way that maybe changed the direction a little bit, and maybe you'll find some exciting new facets that you haven't even thought of yet. You think you know exactly where it's going, but you never know what the road has in store there on the PhD. So I hope that it's really rewarding, and congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah,
that is exciting.
So I suppose what I'll do now is you'll send me some your website and everything for people to go on, and I think I already know your website, but if you can also send a few links to articles that you've done that may relate to what we've said today, or if you're going to write new ones, send me those once you've published them, and I can attach them to this video then, can't I? Just content for people. And yeah, we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, very, very, very enjoyable conversation, Cometan, and best wishes with all that you're doing. Thanks for thanks for those insights and good perspectives and questions and challenges, and we'll stay in touch.
We will. So I'll just stop the recording now.